Hello, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Today we have a special guest, uh, El Lmi, who is actually also my coworker at Equipa 2. But he also has experience in other companies, such as Native Instruments and Nintendo Europe. And today he will talk about the QA role that's what the QA engineer does in every project and why you should have a QA in every project. And with this, I will end my presentation and give word to Al.
Hello everyone. So yeah, first I'd like to thank Rock for giving me the opportunity to make that talk. And yeah, well, I don't know, you already did a quick intro of who I am and my past experiences, so I'm not gonna dwell on that. I guess another thing I would mention is that I studied law and politics, which you might think like this is not the kind of studies that would take you into a QA career. Now I've been doing this for 10 years and I really love that. And I would say that actually one thing that makes QA similar to law is that basically you're looking at a system that someone else has designed and you're trying to find flaws that could be exploited in it. So I guess maybe it makes sense in a certain way. So I would also make a quick disclaimer that yeah, every opinion that I'm gonna voice today are my opinions and not those of my current or previous employers. So covering my ass there, like on the legal side. And yeah, like last thing I would say to introduce this talk is yeah, like so it's mainly like I made prepared it in this in mind with like a showing like the role of QA in people in game development that might not be QA. So yeah, I hope that at the end of it you'll have a better understanding of what is QA and what is it exactly what we do all the time during the day while you're doing your part of the job. And if you are a QA, like yeah, well, I hope I'm not gonna say anything that you're gonna find very outrageous, and maybe I hope I can give you some also new perspective on how to approach QA. So with this being said, let's get started. Oops. So yeah, like I will start with an analogy that I really like is that if a project is a moving car, like the testers or the QA are the headlights, and by that I mean that basically testing well the in my view like one of the main goal of testing is mainly to collect information to make it easier for other people in the project to make the decisions that they need to do to get the project forward. So yeah, like in that sense, yeah, we're the headlights, like saying, hey, there's a pedestrian over there. If we go in that direction, we're gonna run over that pedestrian and so on. Another thing like that might not be always obvious is that testing is a service role. And what I mean by that is that we interact mostly with devs most of the time, but we also like interact with the product team, the game designers, marketing, the customer support, the artist. And I think a big part of the role of QA is also to be like the voice of these people on the project and to make sure that the vision that these people have for the final product is actually translated in the final product. And yeah, would also like there's yeah a common misconception, and one of the reason I don't like the term QA personally. I mean, I'm still using it because I'm not trying to start a revolution here, but I don't like this idea that some people have that QA are the only people who care about quality, or that we don't actually assure the quality. And in my opinion, the quality of your game or whatever software you're developing, it's not the QA who brings it. Like the quality is it's the programmer's job, is the sum of everyone's job, the artist, the game design, etc. And like well, one way I would explain this is like, for example, a common thing that happens as a QA is like you start testing a feature, you find a bug, and the developer will say, "Oh, you broke it." I didn't break it; it was already broken when you gave me the build to test it, and I just show you that it was broken. So yeah, like we don't bring the quality; like the quality is brought by someone else, and we don't take it away either. Like we just give information to the other people working on the project about what is the current status in terms of quality. So yeah, and yeah, and the last thing I would say is that yeah, like basically like we focus on the things that fail, so basically everyone else can focus in their own area of expertise and make sure that their own area of expertise is a success in the end. So yeah, like my next bit is I'm going to talk a bit about project management and go off topic. But yeah, basically one thing to understand about project management is that with any software development project that you might have, you will have basically three variables that you most of the times don't have a lot of control on. It's like the time, which is like when you want the product to be released. And even if it's a side project that you're doing on the side and it's like this small game that you're doing for fun as a hobby, you still want to release it to market and you want it to be released sooner than later. There's the manpower that you have, so how many developers or how many artists or whatever that you have, and there's the feature set. So like you can have some control over this, but yeah, like to use the illustration that we have here on this slide, like the time is going to be the fast one, the cheap is going to be, the manpower is going to be the cheap one, like what is the cost in terms of manpower, and the feature set is going to be how good is going to be your product. So like, yeah, with this in mind, basically a lot of what project management is about, it's about doing trade-offs and getting the best possible result with these limited resources that you have. So another thing, if you had like unlimited resources and unlimited amount of testers and unlimited amount of time, you could obviously test everything and make sure that everything was tested. But in reality, like in every software development project, that's not how it is. So I think also a big part of QA is like about making trade-offs and making the right trade-offs to make sure that you get the best possible results that you have, that you can get with the resources you have. And so yeah, like basically it's important to accept from the beginning that not everything can be tested and you just need to find strategies to deal with that. And this being said, like I know 2020 seems like a very bad year, but I would add that I've been doing QA in software development for long enough that there was a time where like you couldn't patch your software, like it was delivered to the user in a physical format, and once it was out, you couldn't fix the bugs anymore. So yeah, like there's this positive thing about 2020 that even if you don't find all the bugs, you can still fix it up later. So yeah, like how do you optimize this now that how do you optimize your testing now that you've accepted that? So like the thing is like you need to think like the thing I want to say with this slide is like basically a lot of the QA work is thinking work that's not necessarily visible, and like I think like lots of people don't see that part of the job of a QA, which basically like the idea is that any idiot can follow a good test plan, and I would say that should even be the benchmark of a good test plan, in my opinion, in that a good test plan is a test plan that any idiot could follow and execute. But the hard part of doing QA is actually making the right test plan that covers all the possible cases, or at least the cases that are important, and that finds the bugs that are important, because at the end of the day, that's what's important. It's not finding all the bugs, it's finding the bugs that are going to be a serious issue if they go out. So yeah, like another thing that you hear a lot in talks, and that kind of rubs me the wrong way, is like, don't assume, because it makes an ass of you and me. And I'm not saying it's bad advice in general in life, but I would also add, like, for me, it's a problem because 99% of what you do as a QA is make assumptions. And I'm not saying you should make assumptions that are completely not grounded on any reality, but like the importance is to make sure you make the right assumptions. And how you do that, you talk with your team, your devs, your product team, and you'll learn from past mistake. Like if you let a bug out, like, okay, maybe we should have tested this part better, maybe we should have so yeah, like basically make the right assumptions. So I will also, yeah, make a quick thing, like, because I don't know, like, what is a test plan? Maybe it's not clear. So a test plan, it's essentially just a succession of test cases. So it's just like, yeah, you go through the app feature by feature and you try things. So like, what is a test case? It's like basically if a user perform an action in a given context, the result should be that. So yeah, and like I would make a little apartheid here, like that's something that you like this form, like an acceptance test that you have a lot now with some testing frameworks where the, like it's translated as given, when, then. So like given some precondition, like the user is logged in, when some action is performed by the user, like the user clicks that button, then some consequence can be observed, like then something happens. So yeah, like basically this is what a test case is like checking what happens when the user does something in a certain context. So yeah, like now let's go into how to optimize your test coverage and how to think about what you want to test. And you have now this awesome Venn diagram that I made. You can see I'm not a UI designer. So like here, like, we have three circles. So like there's the business critical part of the software. And what I mean by that is like, what are the parts of your software that cannot fail, or if they fail, it's going to be really a problem. And that's like how you decide what is that is like, to give you an example is like, am I going to focus on this part of the gameplay that is essential to the game? Or am I going to focus on this small menu in the settings that most users are not going to even open? So like, yeah, obviously what you want to do is focus on the parts that are going to be the most used by the user and are like bring the most value to your software. Like if it's something, I'm not saying don't test this stuff. I'm saying if you have to prioritize what you test, obviously test the stuff that is business critical. Then there's the risky components in your code. So like what parts of your code are risky? Like, is it like the recent fixes or the recent features that you've implemented that obviously might have issues because it's new code, or is it like the code that has been there for months, if not year, and that hasn't changed and that you've already tested in the past and you know it works? So again, like here, you want to focus on the new stuff. You want to focus on the stuff where like three different people have been committing on that part of the code over the past few weeks, and you don't know how these different commits might interact with one another and what it might have broken. And sorry. And yeah, like I would add this, like another thing that's important, because I mentioned before that you want to test, like to organize your test plan by features. Like also keep in mind that even if you tested one feature separately, make sure that you also cover the feature, like other features and how they integrate with one another. And like, because like, yeah, maybe this one feature you've tested everything that you thought you needed to test, and this other feature you've tested everything that you needed to test. But then like when the user uses these two features at the same time, something that you haven't thought of like breaks, and yeah, then it's not good. So yeah, which brings me to the last circles, which in my opinion is the most important one, because the first two, it's something you have control of. And the last one is things you didn't think your users would do. Like this is like a complete minefield. And like, yeah, the user is always going to use the software that you're working on in ways that you hadn't anticipated. And a big part of QA is thinking about what is the way that the user is going to do that. So yeah, like some questions that you ask yourself as a QA to figure out like these cases that the game designer or the developer haven't thought of is like, what is the worst that the most stupid user can do? Like, for example, in a game, don't assume that what is clear to you as the game designer or as a game developer is going to be clear to everyone. Like, and again, like this depend on your project, like, but think about your users and what is your target audience. So like if you're aiming at kids, is something that is clear to you going to be clear to a 5-year-old? If you aiming for older people, is it going to be clear to someone who's not a hardcore gamer and was only experienced with casual gaming? So this is like the kind of question you need to ask yourself. Another thing that's important in games is will the user always do what you expect him to do at the moment you expect him to do? So like, for example, the game flow, like say you have some quest where the user needs to go pick up a sword, and then he needs to go pick up a shield, and then he goes and fights the boss. Well, what happens if the user doesn't go pick the sword and go picks up the shield first and then goes to the boss? Like, you need to cover these cases. And that's the thing also, as games become more complex, like think of the simplicity of a game like the first Super Mario, where like, yeah, the user can only go one direction. There's not a lot of actions that are possible to the users. Like, he can jump, he can pick up the coins, and there's not a lot that the user can do there, versus like a big open world like Grand Theft Auto, or I don't know, like any of the Bethesda game. And here I like to give a shout out, because like they get a lot of crap for all the bugs that they have, but I don't even want to imagine the amount of work that it is to cover all the possible cases in an open world like the Elder Scrolls game. So yeah, also in that category, something that you need to think is like, what is the worst that the malevolent users will do? And what I mean by that is there any way that the user can exploit like the game economy or exploit the game in general to gain an advantage that you didn't mean him to have? And that's important, for example, if you have like competitive online gaming. Also, like that's important, like to think about how the user can exploit the system. If you have any way for the user to spend money on something in your game, and any way for the user to somehow bypass your payment system. These are also things that you need to think of when you design your game and your system. So yeah, another thing like that's the big things that users do is I mean, on console, you know, like the user is always going to use a PS5. It's always going to be the same system, and it's going to work. If it works on one PS5, it works on every PS5. On mobile and computer gaming, unfortunately, you have no control on what sort of hardware your user is gonna use, and like you need to also think about your test coverage accordingly. Again, depending, and this depends on your project. Like, but if you know that a big part of your users are going to be using like low-end devices, then you need to cover for these cases. Like in mobile gaming, one thing that can happen often is like with low-end devices, you have a different behavior in the game if the FPS is lower, and some actions that work swimmingly on a high-end device causes your game to get in a weird state on some frame specific actions that the user can do. So yeah, like think about what the hardware your users are going to use and test accordingly. So now, like, yeah, you might be wondering, what is this slide? So yeah, like I guess most of everyone is seeing the letter P, but like I don't know, maybe we have some Serbians or some people who have learned to read with the Cyrillic alphabet. They will see something different. So what I'm trying to say here is like one thing that you have to keep in mind also when trying to think about what you want to cover with QA is like, what is the background of your users. So what I mean by that, like I'm obviously localization comes to mind, but there's lots of other things that you need to think of, like your UI, your menus. They might look great for you, but like how would they work for someone who's used to Arabic when things are usually presented from right to left instead of left to right. So this is the kind of things you want to think about. Another thing is like personally, I'm colorblind, so I'm not even sure what is the color of this letter. And yeah, like that's another thing that you need to think of, like the accessibility factor of all sorts of users that you might not think of when you're designing your game. Like, for example, like with the example of color blindness, if you have anything that is color coded in your game, are the colors designed in a way that even for someone who is colorblind, they're going to see that, yeah, this is clearly red, this is clearly green, and this is the difference between these. So yeah, like this is also like the kind of thing you need to think of. And yeah, like it might seem like insignificant details, like when I'm getting into this, and but I think it's important. Like I have another good anecdote, like literally from today. Like we received the new iPhone 12 for testing purposes, and so I was setting up the iPhone 12, and like when you set it up, you have the choice between like a standard or zoomed display. And I was like, okay, let's try this zoomed display, which I guess is for like people who are short-sighted. So the icons are a bit bigger, and like the text is a bit bigger, etc. And yeah, the moment I opened the game that I'm testing, like the display was wrong and it was not displayed the way we expected it. So like, yeah, think about like the way the user is gonna, again, back to what I was saying, like the ways that the user is gonna use your game with some weird settings on his system that you might not have thought of yourself while you designed the game. And yeah, like it's maybe like, again, like this might be minor details, but in the end, like I think it's important to look into this. Like it's not going to make a bad game or bad software good, but it's going to make a good game better. So yeah, like now I want to talk a bit about tester and developer interactions, because I think like I mean, I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but I think like on both sides there are sometimes like misunderstandings, and maybe like a bit of better understanding of what we do each other, what we each other do might help there. So yeah, like basically what you need to think on both sides, like both as a tester and as a developer, is how can you help each other do a better job. So on the side of tester, I think like, I mean, it's not that big an issue, but I've seen it in some of the companies I worked in, like where some testers lack diplomacy, and like, yeah, like when you make a bug report, make it factual, and like, yeah, don't use an adjective in your bug report. There's rarely any good reason to use an adjective in in a bug report, like, because like, yeah, like it's easy for a bug report to look like you're directly criticizing the developer's work. And yeah, like, I mean, it's also as a developer to know how to receive the feedback without taking it personal. But yeah, like, I think that there's something there, like, and yeah, like when I'm talking about bug reports, I think like another thing I would mention is obviously you need to work this at with your project, depending on who you work. Some people like to have super detailed bug report. Some people like to just have the quick explanation and not have to read through a wall of text. Personally, my personal opinion is that I'm more on the side of giving more details, but I also understand that some developers don't like that. But I would defend like my standpoint on this is that, yeah, having a detailed bug report is, it pays off in the long term, because even if it's just for you and the developer, like you don't know when this bug is going to be fixed. So if you don't put some information in the bug report thinking, yeah, okay, I know how to reproduce this bug, I know why it happens, I mean, I don't need to put all these details. Well, you don't know when the bug is going to be fixed. Maybe it's going to be like delayed because there are other priorities, and maybe this bug will be fixed months later. Maybe you will have left the project and someone else will have to look at the bug, and then like that person will not understand what this very vague bug that you've described is about. And so yeah, like and even for yourself, like sometimes like I open a bugs and it takes months to be fixed, and yeah, like months later I look at my bug reports and even I don't remember what the bug was about. So to me, there's really like some payoff there in investing in putting some time in making the bug reports detailed, so that you and everyone who might have to look into this bug can benefit later. Another like good anecdote I have about this is that when I was working at Nintendo, basically most of the times the developers were working in Japan and were Japanese. So yeah, like basically our bug reports were translated into Japanese and then sent to the developers, whose answers and replies and comments were also translated in Japanese. And yeah, like translating to Japanese, there's lots of way, like exactly like the movie, that where things can be lost in translation. So yeah, like that was for me a good school in like seeing like what is the benefit in making your bug reports details. But again, like that's my personal opinion, and I would understand why some people some people might not agree. So yeah, another thing as a QA that you can do is like choose your battles. Like don't fight with developers to have every bug fixed. Like, and estimate like if it's really worth fixing the bug. Like estimate what is the risk. Like if we fix this bug, is it gonna create like, is there any risk that fixing this bug will create more issues? Is the time that the developer is gonna spend to fix a bug that is in the end maybe not something users will notice, or that will not be a big annoyance to the user, will this like jeopardize the delivery of another feature that actually brings value to the user? So yeah, like as a tester, don't fight for all the bugs to be fixed. Know when to fight and when to pick your battles. I think another thing that you can do as a tester is like, you don't need to understand programmation and to be able to open the Git repo and look at the code base and understand everything, but it will really help you if you understand at least a bit of programmation, like what is a class, what is a function, what is a variable, and like you don't need to know how to program, but it's really gonna help you understand how developers think, and like when a developers explain why a bug cannot be fixed, like you're in a better position to understand that. And also like having a better, and it's not just about coding, it's also get an interest in the technology you're using, because like if you understand the technology that the game is built upon, even if you don't have a deep understanding of it, like you have a better understanding of how things can fail, and when things fail you have a better understanding of why it fails. And like this also shows in your bug report, like if you're able to clearly describe what is happening. Like, is it like the backend who's not responding like we expect, or basically having, you're not expected to have like a complete developer level of understanding, but it will really make you a better QA if you take the time to at least get a basic understanding of the technology that you're testing. So on the side of programmers or developers, like how you can help your testers, like yeah, there's obviously the one obvious thing is like make the product testable. So what I mean by that is like have any debug feature that you're, I mean not any, because they can be, QA can be unreasonable, but try to help your QA test the product. Like if there are states that are difficult to obtain with normal usage of the product, like make it possible for testers to get through this state through some debug features. Like what I mean is like if you have like, yeah, 50 levels game with the final boss at the end, yeah, you want to make sure that your tester can go to the final boss without having to do the 50 levels every time he needs to verify that this works. Sorry. Another thing is like, yeah, more detailed logs, or when possible, like back to the analogy that I gave at the beginning, where like the one of the role of testing is to give information. Like the more information your testers have access to while they test, the better the bug reports you're gonna get. So yeah, that's to me really worth the effort to do on the programmers and developers side, to put this extra work in making the product testable and making the product like, try to help your QA help you basically. There's also like an automated test, like this I will go back a bit, go back to it a bit later, but yeah, basically like the less time your testers are spending features manually, the the more time, no, yeah, I mean the more time the more coverage you have in automated test, the less time your tester will spend testing stuff manually that can be covered by automating the test, and the more time they can spend like doing the testing that you need to do them manually. So there's also some benefit there. And last thing that I would say for developers is like, please keep in mind the testing when you estimate the time that a task will take. Like, because like, yeah, you get this task and you're like, yeah, I will implement this in 2 days, and you do implement it in 2 days, but yeah, then we get the first build and there's a bug. So we open a bug, then you fix the bug, and the bug fix has created 3 new bugs. And yeah, in the end, like the task that you had estimated to take 2 days takes a whole week. So yeah, like help everyone in the project by taking like bearing in mind when you estimate how long a task will test and to be developed, bear in mind the time it takes also to be tested and to be to a point where it's final and ready to ship. So yeah, my next slide will be about like the tools of the trade. Like I'm gonna be very high level there and not go too much in the details. But yeah, just to explain like what are the tools that we use on a daily basis as a QA. So like there's project management software. I guess most people are familiar with Jira. It seems to be the industry standard, or at least it's been in most of the company I worked with. I've also worked with the other ones that you may or may not have heard of, like Fogbugs and Fabricator, but honestly, I won't advocate for one or the other. They all do the same in my opinion. Like it's just a different UI or a different UX, and so just find the one that you like and find the one that fits your team and project. So yeah, like for those who are not familiar with this, like they are basically their use is to track the progress of a project and making sure that everyone working on the project is aware of what's left to implement, what is left to fix, what is the status of all pending tasks, and what bugs needs to be fixed, and how critical or not critical the bugs or the tasks that are still to be done before we reach the milestone that we've set for ourselves. Like basically getting a easy way of getting what is the status of the project at any given time. So yeah, there's bug tracking and test management software. So yeah, like the most famous are TestRail. Now there are quite a few also that you can integrate in Jira, like Zephyr. And again, I don't need to go into the details of all of these. Like basically, there's just a way to document your test cases for future regression tests. So yeah, for those who do not know what is regression test, is like basically like all of the test cases that you have organized in the test plans that I mentioned earlier, like you might want at a later date to run them again to make sure that everything that still worked before still works now. And yeah, like this is what regression testing is. And yeah, if something that worked before doesn't work anymore, that's what we call a regression. Then you have like testing frameworks for automation. So like, yeah, I put the most famous ones: Selenium, Appium, Robot Framework, which is the one I have the most of experience with. Again, like there are, cannot, I mean, it could be a whole presentation to go into the details of how this works, but yeah, the general idea is to have like some sort of framework to organize your testing in a way that makes sense. And some of them like facilitates the work of the QA to write the test themselves by using keywords instead of proper code and so on. And yeah, like here also maybe a quick word on continuous integration, because yeah, like having automated tests means you can like run them on a nightly basis, like if you have like any continuous integration tool like Jenkins or Bamboo or whatever you're using. So yeah, like and yeah, like then you have like all sorts of tools that it could take like 2 days to go through all the tools. But yeah, basically what I mean by all these tools were for different purpose, like for example stuff that lets you see the API response for a given request, stuff that lets you look at your HTTPS traffic while you're using something that is connected to the internet, even like stuff that lets you capture your screen so you can make a better bug report. Like basically I think all of these tools, like the back to again this initial analogy of the headlights, it's like basically trying to provide information that you can then use to better inform everyone of why this is failing. And like basically what I mean is having something like that on top like of your headlights view, like you can like really see what's going on there and have a better view and provide better info for all the stakeholders in the project. So yeah, like now I have a few thoughts on automated tests. So like, yeah, one thing that a lot of people, or at least that I've seen, think is like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have automated tests and it's gonna be great and everything's gonna be fine. And from now on, we don't have to test anymore and everything's gonna be automated. So yeah, like it's not gonna be a magic bullet. Like automated tests have their use, that's for sure. But like you need first to bear in mind it's code, and like any code, it needs to be maintained. And like maintaining it also has a cost in your developer's time. So yeah, all the time that is spent maintaining that code is also time that you're not going to work on new features or whatever. So it's one thing to keep in mind when you start, like when you decide, okay, we're going to have automated tests, keep in mind that yeah, it's code and you need to maintain it. Like not properly maintained tests, like they end up not being very useful. Like I have a good anecdote about that, because yeah, like I said, in one of my previous company, we were using Robot Framework, and we had this automated test, which was basically running our installers on virtual machines every night and making sure that all the files were in the location that we expected them to be at the end once the installer had run. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And then like, yeah, one of the tests started failing because of some race conditions on the VM. So what did we do? We were like, okay, like the test fails, but we know the installer still works. So yeah, let's just disable this test for now, and we'll look into it later when we have time to fix that test. Then there was some change in the OS X file system. I think it was in 10.13, if I remember correctly. And yeah, like this change in the file system also broke something in the test. Again, the installers were working fine. So we just disabled that other test. And yeah, like what I'm trying to say here is like, yeah, like if you're not maintaining your tests, you're just gonna have tests that fail and you know why they fail, and like you're just going to disable them. But yeah, like then what is this? Because again, back to what I was saying with the headlights analogy, like what is the info you get from tests that fail all the time and you know why they fail? Like it's not useful info. So was it really worth it, the time you invested in making these automated tests, if you're not gathering info that is not helping your project in any way? So then, yeah, about what to automate, like obviously, like automate checks versus test. What I mean by checks is like automate the stuff that computers are good at, tasks that computers are good at doing. So what I mean by that is like if like the test you're trying to do is like comparing that the return value is the same as the value that you expect, then yeah, obviously that's a good candidate for an automated test, because computers are good at comparing values. Uh, Other good candidates is like any sort of load testing, or like, yeah, what happens if like 50 users connect at the same time? What happens if I let my application run for like 10 days straight? Like, this is stuff that, yeah, obviously you automate that. You're not going to ask your tester to like look at the screen for 10 days and see what happened. And tests is like the stuff that actually requires a human brain, and this is like keep your human brain capacity to test that. So like for games, it's like, yeah, the complex aspects of gameplay that no computer, at least now, is capable of looking at this and saying, okay, like here there's a bug because like, yeah, this particular thing is not working like it's expected. Like, so yeah, automate the stuff that computers are good at and leave the manual testers do the manual testing where humans are good at. And yeah, I would also make a word about test-driven development, which is a term that you might have heard, or it's also called TDD. So yeah, it's like a new trend in development where like basically with automated test, at least what you do is you're writing the test before you write any code. And then with every iteration, you run the tests until like all the code is in there and all the tests are passing. So yeah, I think it's an interesting approach. And I would also like add that it doesn't have to be about automation. I mean, obviously, like you will mostly hear this about automated testing, this test-driven development, but I think this approach can also be used in manual testing. And by that I mean is like take an interest as a developer into what test plan, like if you know in advance what is the test plan of your QA and what is your QA is going to manually test. If you look at the test plan, you can already see what the QA is going to test, and maybe the QA, when he prepared the test plan, is already found some corner case that you didn't think of that he knows is going to test. So if you look at the test plan before, like again, you know what test your feature or your product is going to have to pass, and you can already like fix the bugs before we even find them. So I guess everyone wins there. So yeah, like basically in conclusion, I would use this quote, which is: the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. So yeah, like what I like to illustrate my point is like, yeah, don't view QA as something at the end of the chain that you can like ignore until like the last week before you need the like. If you invest in QA early, and if you take an interest into what your QA does, and do that early and talk with your QA early in the project and involve the QA early in the project, it's gonna be definitely beneficial for your project, and your future self will thank you. So like, yeah, I don't think if you don't like, you can just like not take care of QA until the end, and that everything's going to be fine. Like take the cost that it costs to invest in QA in the beginning, because this higher price is going to be worth the price in the long run. So yeah, like thanks for having listened to me ramble about QA for, I don't know, half an hour. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, El. And now we will have a Q&A session. So you can type your questions into the comments into YouTube video, or you can also put here into the Zoom chat. And I think we have one question, or rather like statement from Michał Plasnik. So it goes, so because sometimes it's difficult to test all the scenarios, for example, testing a feature that is available only on fourth level of Ginger, I don't know, it's mostly like a statement. Like that's why I only test business programs. Yeah. There is question from Milian Plusaro. So, hi El, thank you for the presentation. My question is, what is your boss reaction to not everything can be tested? Deal with it.
I think like what's important there is like, because basically as a tester, the danger is to say, okay, like what does it mean as a tester when I say testing is complete? Does it mean like, have I found all the bugs, or does it mean like, okay, we have these tests? So like, I think what's important is to make sure that everyone's expectations is matching. So like, if you can explain what you're going to test and why you decide to test this and not that, and explain why you're like, I think it's basically like it's mostly about I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but like it's about managing everyone's expectations and making sure what we mean when we say like testing is now complete, what exactly does it entail. And usually like there's a way to find an agreement, because again, like you can only test so much, because that's the thing also, the risk with QA is like, if you want to overdo it, like you're never going to release anything, because like so like what level of testing can you say you've done that you have a reasonable, like a reasonable confidence that you found all the bugs, and that at least that you found, again, like not all the bugs, but most of the important bugs that are going to be an issue if the product is released with that.
Okay, thank you for the question, El. Thanks for the answer. I guess we can wait a little bit more for the questions. And in meanwhile, I will ask one of my questions. I mean, I have a few of them. One question, like in the beginning of your slides, you were saying like, yeah, if you would had like unlimited amount of QA engineers, or like infinite amount of like power of people, like, but is there like any point where like too much people becomes too much, is there like
I don't know,
point?
like I would say it's never enough, because like, yeah, for example, in Nintendo, as you can guess, like the teams are very large, and we had like, I don't know, in Nintendo of Europe, we had like, yeah, literally something like 200 or 300 QA testers. And I mean, obviously it also shows in that, yeah, like one of the reasons Nintendo is because the standards of quality are what they are. So, but yeah, like that's the thing. I think if you have unlimited amount of money and you want to spend that money on having 300 QA testers, you can do that. Like, so yeah, like, I don't know, like that's the thing. I I kind of see what you mean, and obviously like, that's what basically I think that's what I was trying to say, is like, anyway, one way or another, you're gonna have an upwards limit of how many people you have on your project. And to me, a big part of QA is like making
Yeah.
sure that these resources that you have are used in the proper way. Like, I've also been in team where I was the only QA, and we made it work. So yeah, like I think, again, I don't have like any because yeah, I feel that a lot of what I said was, yeah, okay, it depends on your project. And yeah, I think like the answer to almost everything in life is, yeah, it depends. I don't know if that
Okay.
answers your
Yeah,
question.
that answers the my question. Um, so one other question uh, that is from Yasmina Hebar. Do you have any advice on how to gain basic development knowledge, or if you don't have any, because you said that it
But if you don't like, if you're working in a team in a development project, I would say the first thing is like, go talk to your devs. Like devs, like at least the ones I worked with, so maybe I was lucky, they love talking about what they do. So like, ask them question. Like, one thing I found useful is like, ask the dev to explain to you how things work. Like, maybe ask them to, like, if they can take the time, ask them to do a graph that shows how things work. And like, yeah, like I would say, talk to your devs. If you don't work in a project development team and you just want to, like, I mean, nowadays, like, there's many online online courses to learn any language. Like, try to learn a simple scripting language. Like, you're not, again, I'm not saying like become a C++ expert, but yeah, like, even if you learn, like, I don't know, like, personally, the language I started learning is Python, and I like it. So that's the one I would recommend. But I think, yeah, we could go into countless arguments about what's the best language. But yeah, like, learning any programming language, even the basics, it's going to give you already an understanding of how code works, and a better idea of like how different things work. So yeah, like, I would say, talk to devs, like, go to meetups. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I hope it answers the question.
okay. One more question from Milian. What is the percentage of automated versus manual tests in game development?
I think like a deeper, like in the different, like in software development in general, I've seen different. And again, like, also like it depends how you define automated tests. Like, there's lots of automated tests that QA is not really involved in, like when like developers write unit tests that test like at really like the highest level of the code. So like in my experience as a QA, I would say it's really like 10% to 90. Like in the automated test that I am involved in as a QA, I think it's still like 10% to 90%. But I see that there's also a big part of the iceberg that I might not be seeing because I'm not going deeper in the code, and there's definitely unit tests that I have no idea about. So yeah, like maybe Roke can have a Roke, or if there's any developer who wants to chime in there. But as far as QA, like that's the thing. Like may allow me to go a bit off topic, but yeah, I guess one concern you might have if you have a career in QA, or if you're thinking about a career in QA is, yeah, but yeah, and like now with all of this automated tests, like maybe my job is going to be made obsolete. Like my personal experience is that manual QA is still like, unless like your product is very technical, if your product is going to be in the end of the users, there's really like a big part of QA that you're never going to be able to automate, or that at the moment I really don't see that we have the technology to really automate stuff that QA, because like that's the thing. Yeah, like I said, a computer is going to be fine at seeing if a value is not the value you expect to return, but yeah, like a computer will not see if like some minor thing of the game design is not exactly how it should be, like in terms of how it should respond to user input and so on. So yeah, like basically what I wanted to say here is like personally, I'm really not worried about being my job being automated away. And even when that's the case and we have the technology, someone is still gonna have to QA whatever scripts or machines are doing the testing. So yeah, I guess I'll look for a job in that. I don't know if that answers the question because I went a bit on a tangent there.
I think it is, and I will check later the comment from Miljan. But I also like to add on to your answer is yeah, like usually in game development it's really hard to automate tests. I mean, you can do it like for some manual checks, like for let's say localization, as you said, or like some things that you can just do a checks, right? Like I don't know, like if some files are in correct folder, if I don't know if assets are in the right way, but to test actual like logic, it's really hard because you don't know what user will do. Like they are playing in different ways and so on. So yeah. And now I will give a question to Jessica.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. I'm actually a tester from another industry, and I was wondering what a junior tester should need to become a tester on this industry specifically. Because I come from the medtech, and we have these really hard requirements and test plans, and a really different organization when it comes to bug reporting and bug fixing. And the testing side, it's chaotic, but at the same time, it's really organized. And I really was wondering, what do you really need to become a good tester, and especially to be welcomed on this industry, especially when you have the experience but in a very different project and an industry
If you
coding.
allow me, like I would say like thank God I don't have your job, because like yeah, I guess since you mentioned med tech, like that's the thing. Like the worst that can happen if I let a bug is like, yeah, some kid is not gonna get his imaginary coins in a game. So yeah, like I think the quality standards in medtech are absolutely probably a lot more stringent than they are in games. So I don't know, like because like I started at Nintendo, and I'm sure that this really opened doors for me later. But also like my personal experience is that I don't see, I mean, at the highest level, I don't see such a big difference in any sort of software testing. To me, like the principles are always the same. So I would say if you have the experience in another industry than games, and you're capable during the hiring process of showing that you have this experience and you are passionate about games, and you want to work in games, I don't see any obstacle where I mean, I don't know, that's personally my experience is that like it was never an issue because I started at Nintendo, then I worked for a couple of startups, one of which was a password manager, like something similar to LastPass. The other one was a VPN, like a browser plugin to like bypass geolocation. Then it was music software, and at no point during the hiring process anyone questioned like how do you think that, I mean, like there is a bit like actually like there is a bit of how does your experience translate in this industry, but again, if you're competent in your area of expertise and you're capable of showing it during the hiring process, I don't see it as a big obstacle to jump from one industry to the other.
Great, thank you.
There's also one more question from YouTube. From Million, like how many QA people are there in Equipa 2? Internal staff, not outsourced. And he is thanking you for all the answers. They're really helpful.
I don't know, like about this one, is it like violating my NDA? I mean, I don't even know actually how many people we are in Equipa 2, but I don't know, like Rock, what's your take on this?
Oh, I see now. I think Alenka already answered. Alenka said like there's around 30 people working on different projects. So I guess 30
Okay,
people,
so
like 30.
if we violated some NDA, it's Alenka.
Also like had one question about like the team sizes. Like you briefly like just mentioned like Nintendo. Like, do you maybe know how like these, let's say, huge companies or like let's say AAA companies, like how did they like test like open world like games, like, you know, because okay, I can imagine like for like my Talking Tom, like how you would test it, but I cannot imagine like kind of like Zelda or
But honestly, I think like that's the thing, when you're a big company like Nintendo or Rockstar, you obviously have a lot more like money to spend on manpower, and I would say like one thing that like maybe is not super positive is that like as everyone who's has an interest in the games industry, like first of all, like you know that there's like lots of crunch time where people work impossible hours to make these games happen. So like there's obviously that, and I think like like there's also the fact like I think they have lots of like, at least that was my experience in Nintendo, that they hire like lots of temporary people for periods of crunch time, which are like just given a test plan that they follow, like test monkeys, and they don't really have an input. So like I would say like that's a bit like, I mean, without going into something too political, but that I guess like that's a topic that's been going on in the games industry for a while, like the like workplace aspects of what goes into delivering a game like Grand Theft Auto and so on. And like the answer to your question is like worker exploitation. I don't know. Like I don't want to get too political.
Thank you for the answer. Yeah. Do we have anything else? I am checking now. Nothing now. But in meanwhile, I can ask like one other question if I wait for other questions. One question was like, if you would be put like in a shoes of like indie developer or in a shoes of some small studio, like how would you like go in about like the test coverage? You said like that there are a lot of like mobile devices and like PCs. Are there any like services that you can like put your build on and they test on different devices, or is there any other way like how you can like assure
Honestly,
that?
as an indie developer, I would say like I'm gonna assume you don't have a big budget. So like I don't know like like I don't know, because I've never really worked on any indie project, but that's the thing. I think like there's enough people who are passionate about game, like the same way that how do you deal with getting UI design done for your indie game? Like usually what you will do is like find someone who's fine with doing it as a side gig. Like so, like I don't know, like there are obviously services to outsource QA. Then again, like I don't know, like if it's within your range, like you by all means like look into that. Like like there are companies who outsource QA. Like one that comes to mind is I think Keyword Studio. They have office all over the world, but I have no idea what is their pricing either, and if it's in the range of an indie developer, because usually they work more with bigger developers. But yeah, like my approach personally, if I was working on an indie game, is like try to get people who to volunteer into it. Like I don't know if you, for example, you have like already some website set up to build the hype about your indie game or whatever, or you have like some sort of small community on Discord. Like try to get like users to be beta testers, and yeah, like this will also increase your coverage and also bring you like because like, at the end, like that's what I was saying also, like the QA, like ultimately you're the voice of the users, and you're trying, because yeah, I was saying, yeah, we're making sure that the vision of everyone is translated in the final game, but we're also making sure that the user is going to enjoy the experience of the game. So like basically what we're doing is acting as an interface between software development team and the users. And actually, like, yeah, if you can do that and have your users do the beta testing, which I think like now lots of companies, like especially for indie games, like where you can, well, I mean, some people abuse it as well, where there are games which are in pre-alpha forever. But yeah, like this is what I would look into. But again, like there are also services that do outsource QA, but I'm not sure what is the pricing, and I don't want to talk of something that I don't really know about.
Okay,
Not sure if
thank
that
you.
answers the question.
I think that answers the question. Um, one other thing like that I wanted to ask, like your past experience was also like in audio software and hardware, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean, it was like a basically native instruments. I don't know if everyone is familiar with them, but yeah, they're making audio, but also hardware. I mean, I was not directly testing the hardware, but testing that the software that we made integrated correctly with the hardware. So I might not have like super deep knowledge of the hardware. If that's where your question is headed.
no, just one question was here was like, how did you like then test? I mean, I imagine this was like big machines or like
Yeah, but yeah, like it's like I mean, it's a big machine, like it's a keyboard, or it's like a machine, like I don't know if you know this, like with the pads and everything. But yeah, like we had like testing devices, and yeah, no, like I mean, like, actually it was like we could make the testing fun, because it was also like music software. So like we would have test sessions where, yeah, let's just set up like 5 keyboards together and have a jam session, and that's testing too, you know. So yeah, like no, but I mean, in the end, it's the same as what we have in Outfit 7, where we have lots of test devices, and like, yeah, you test on the test devices. And in this case, the test devices, the hardware that we were testing on was not mobile devices, but keyboards, but it's not fundamentally different.
Mm. Thank you. There's also one question from Anna F, which asks, do you test from a specific point of view, like having in a mind different personas playing the game, or do you mostly test from your testing experience?
But I think that's what I was trying to say, that as a tester, it's important for you to try to impersonate different personas. So like, yeah, try to look at it from the standpoint of someone who has no experience using mobile devices, try to experience the game. And I mean, it's not, obviously you're never going to cover all the possible users that you can have, but yeah, like I would say, at least personally, I'm definitely changing hats. And sometimes I'm testing with the mindset of looking at, okay, how would this look if I'm a user who like is short-sighted, or like how would this look if I'm an Arabic user who has his device set to Arabic and all the menus are from right to left, and how does the game look in that context? So yeah, you are, I mean, I would advise and recommend to like use different persona, and you will find different issues that you wouldn't find if you were not putting yourself in the shoes of these people. I mean, yeah, that's why. I hope it answers the question.
Maybe like an add-on to this question, like do you also like prepare like test plans like for people with like disabilities, right? I mean,
Well,
is the previous said.
it's I mean, it's not something that I would necessarily always test. And I guess, I mean, because again, like that's also what I meant to say by know what what your target audience is. Like obviously, like I know that, not like, because for example, like to go back to the example of music instruments, like we had some of our target audience, which were people who were blind, but like, I mean, everyone knows Stevie Wonder, he might want to use a keyboard at some point. So yeah, like we want to cover the case of Stevie Wonder, like for the case of a mobile game for kids. I don't know if we want to cover the case of Stevie Wonder. So yeah, that's what I mean is like, think about who is likely to get your software or your game at the end of the day, and cover for this case. Again, like that's also what I was trying to say with making trade-offs. You're not going to test for every possible users. Test for the users that are the most likely to experience your game, and make sure that the experience is pleasant for these users. But yeah, like you don't need to test everything for everyone. I mean, ideally, yeah, you would, but again, like it's a game of making compromise and making sure that you make your right compromise. So know your target audience, and for this, like I would add maybe like it's important to have like data on. So like, for example, are the people, what is the majority of devices that your target audience is using? Like if you can have access to this data, know like what percentage of your users are still on like 3 or 4 version before of the OS that your software is running on. Like if, for example, if you have like 1% of your user base that is still using, I don't know, OS 10.11, OS X 10.11, like, is it really worth your time to spend a lot of time testing OS X on 10.11? Probably not. So that's what I mean. Like, try to gather as much data as you can about what are your users, and based on this data, make the right assumptions on where you should focus your testing.
Thank you, El. Another question from Urshka. What other soft skills help you most at your everyday work? Behavioristic, psychology, role plays?
That's a really interesting question. I like this question.
And it continues. And which skill set you will still invest to evolve in the future even more in depth?
No, but yeah, I think it's interesting, like, because yeah, like I almost wanted to make a slide about this, but then I was not sure if I would run out of time, but maybe I could have. But yeah, like I think a lot of like, because yeah, that's what I said with the slide, where a lot of QA work is thinking, and yeah, like a lot of it, yeah, like it can be based on yeah, like almost philosophical or psychological, like for example, how is your user going to like experiment your like basically like trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone else, and not just the users, but also like what I said, like trying to be an interface and force of balance in the team, like because in the end, like all the people who make a game or any software happen, it's like they have conflicting interests. Like what the developers want might not be in line with what I don't know, like I feel like I'm going a bit on a tangent there, but I'm interested what I'm going to say. I mean, I think it's interesting, so I'm going to finish, and maybe if I can complete. But yeah, like trying to understand the psychology of every person, like what is the interest of game design versus the interest of marketing, what is the interest of developers versus what is the interest of UI artists versus what is the interest of the users, and how you can juggle all of this as a QA to make sure that everyone's interest is represented. Yeah, like it's a lot of diplomacy, and maybe like, yeah, you need some understanding of human psychology. So yeah, like there's definitely a bit of that. I don't know if I'm answering the question really, but yeah, like I would say that I've learned a lot about human psychology, and yeah, like basically human behavior, and how you can optimize. Like I'm not saying like doing some social engineering, but yeah, trying to get people to agree that when they have like literally diverging interests. So yeah, like there's a bit of that in QA, and what is another thing that I want? Yeah, a very good soft skill, but I don't know like if it's something that you are gifted with, or that you can exercise, but that I found has been very useful for me as a QA is having a good memory, because like, yeah, remember like that one bug 6 months ago that happened, and like, yeah, something similar happens. Yeah, it's useful information to be like, ah, wait, we've seen that before, like, and how did we fix it at the time? Or again, like what I was saying with like, yeah, remembering what you did like 6 months before when you found that bug, like remembering the exact steps to reproduce a bug. Like, so yeah, like having a good memory I think is a good thing. But again, I don't know, like I think I have a good memory, but I'm not sure if it's something you can train or if it's just a gift that you have. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, I'm happy if there's a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. We can wait actually for the follow-up. And in the meanwhile, there is also a question from Anafa, and yeah, she also thanks you for the previous answer. And her question now is, she was also wondering if the user research team or anyone else provides you which personas are playing the game.
So yeah, I mean, like this is something that I've done in several of my it's a thing like I don't know, like we don't use this word a lot. I mean, I haven't heard it a lot at Outfit 7, but maybe because I was not in the right meetings. But yeah, it's definitely something that should be guiding your testing, like having So yeah, for people who might be following and don't know, it's like the personas is trying to have not a stereotype, but an archetype of like what are the main users of your game or your whatever software product. And for example, in our case, it could be like, is it like the kid who has borrowed the iPad from his parents because the parents want to have some alone time, or is it the one guy who likes to play the mini games as a casual way of spending time, or is it, I don't know, the collector type of guy who wants to collect all the possible items that are in the game? And yeah, like this is definitely like also useful to have this in mind, and to try to make sure that whatever feature you're implementing. But this again, like it's also like a big part of like what game design is about. Like, I mean, I don't want to overstep my bound. Like, to me, I'm there to provide information to game design or to UI or whatever, to make sure that but I think it's also this work is also done at the level of like product and game design, to make sure that all these personas are covered and like also defined. So yeah, like, but it's definitely something that you should, as a QA, have in mind and bear in mind when you're testing. I don't know if that answered the question.
I think in it, we will wait, I guess, for the response because it lags a little bit after. But in meanwhile, I will ask, I guess, one of my last question, and then we can wait a little bit for other questions, and I guess we can slowly finish if there won't be any more questions. But so my last question was kind of on the like story or like topic that you were saying about Nintendo and bug reports, um, where you would like translate and then send the bug report to developers, and then they would translate and send back the comments, right? Like how did you like solve like
No, but
how did you
basically,
like, bridge
yeah.
this translation thingy? And yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, basically there was like entire team of translators dedicated just to translating bug reports into Japanese and sending them to Japan, and then translating back. And yeah, that's the thing. There was like sometimes like you would get because like yeah, so yeah, to me like that was the big lesson there, is like try to make your bug reports as less ambiguous as possible, because like especially in that case, like sometimes like yeah, there was like clearly some misunderstandings, or like even like we would get answers we had no idea, like literally no one in the team had no idea what what the developers reply meant. So yeah, like it really taught me a lesson, and like yeah, try to be as less ambiguous as possible and be as to the point and factual as possible. Like yeah, I don't know, like I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, like it was definitely a good lesson in like how a bad bug report can make waste everyone time, and how investing the time to make your bug report a little bit more detailed, like instead of having 3 back and forth, you have one. And especially since it was in Japan, they were also in a different time zone than us, so they were not working at the same time. So like yeah, sometimes it would take 2 days to get some, even just a reply that was just a follow-up question on your bug report without any work being done. So yeah, like when you're getting close to the deadline, yeah, like this is the kind of stress you want to avoid, and you want to make it to the point.
Mm. And so these translators, they were also like technical people or just like normal
No, I think
employees?
but that's the thing. I think also like there was like such a big volume of bugs to be translated, and I guess it was not just bugs because like all the communication had to be translated. So yeah, I think like there's only so much professional translator who can translate from English to Japanese in Germany, because yeah, it was in Frankfurt. So yeah, like yeah, I guess like I'm not sure if they were all technical people.
Okay. Thank you, Al. I think I will wait a few minutes for like some more questions, but if not, that's all. Okay, wait. So there's one more question. Should/can QA also test if a game mechanic is fun in air quotes?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. No, yeah, like like if it gets to the point where you have the game in game and it's not fun, like there's been lots of mistakes being made, because like that's also one thing I wanted to say is like yeah, if it doesn't look like it's gonna be fun, you or someone else in the team should have pointed it out before. But yeah, it's definitely also even like something that is potentially fun. Like yeah, maybe like yeah, the concept is fun, but yeah, like the controls are not responsive enough, or like the difficulty is a bit too high or a bit too low. And yeah, like this is definitely also part of your job as a QA to point these things out, that because again, like the game designer could have been done a perfect job in designing the best feature ever, and on paper it's great, but you need to tweak some parameters to make it fun, to make it like the fun that it was designed to be. But that's also what I mean in like saying that your role as a QA is to make sure that the vision that the game designer had in mind, because I don't think if any game designer sits down and be like, okay, how can I make this feature not fun? So yeah, like, yeah, it's part of your role as a QA to make sure it's as fun as it was meant to be, and also even more fun than it was meant to be if you see a way that it can be improved, definitely.
There's also one more question from Miljan. What's the most recurring bug you had in your career?
Good question. It crashes at lunch.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, if there's a bug that I've seen on every software that I test, is like, yeah, sometimes you get a build and it crashes at launch and that's it. Like really, it's the one, like it's the one that is the most common. I mean, usually it's not a bug that makes it out in the wild, but yeah, like as far as bugs go, yeah, the build crashes at launch. That's the most common. Like I don't know if we're talking bugs that go in the wild. Honestly, I don't really. No, honestly, like usually bugs that go in the wild is yeah, it's problems of test coverage, like, or maybe like the integration between two features that we should have tested more thoroughly, or yeah, like I think these are the most common bugs that I would see going out, like, or maybe some crash that we didn't find because we didn't test it on the right device. But honestly, like if you, yeah, like I don't know, like that's the thing. It's never the same bugs. It's always something new.
Yeah, thank you. I think that answers the question. So yeah, I guess we will wait for last few minutes, and yeah, and then we will stop the stream. And again, El, thank you for taking time
Okay.
and for this lovely presentation and the Q&A session. And I think, yeah, I think we'll end it here. Wait, let me stop this. Wait, yeah.